She was just a mechanic's daughter until her code brought down the most powerful surveillance system in the world. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Stay till the end to see how one teenage girl rewrote the rules of justice with nothing but her mind, her courage, and a laptop. At the edge of an old industrial district in Michigan, tucked behind a scrapyard of rusted engines and broken axles, stood a tiny garage Malcolm Auto Repair. Inside, the dim glow of a single overhead light flickered, casting long shadows over tools and spare parts scattered like puzzle pieces. 13-year-old Elara Malcolm sat quietly in the corner, her fingers blackened with grease, her eyes fixed on a worn laptop. She wasn't fixing her car. She was breaking into one, virtually. The new Veltrax EV Porsche parked outside had arrived just this morning. Sleek, untouchable, unhackable, they said. But Elara didn't believe in that word. As her fingers danced across the keys, she could still hear the laughter of the man who dropped it off, a tech executive who had mocked her father for raising a grease monkey. That laugh had etched itself into her bones. But what he didn't know was that behind the oil-stained hands was a mind sharp enough to cut through corporate firewalls like paper. The garage was silent, but inside Elara something was roaring. Not rage, not revenge. Purpose. The engine's interface was more than just software. It was a fortress. Encrypted firewalls, decoy systems, and layers of corporate countermeasures lay before her like locked doors in a labyrinth. But Elara had been breaking into systems since she was 9, starting with her school's attendance server, then moving on to anything she could find online that claimed to be unbreakable. This was different. As she cracked deeper into the Porsche's neural firmware, something strange happened. A window popped open. Not code, not data, a video. It showed the same man who mocked her father, standing in a lab, laughing with another engineer. But what made her breath catch wasn't the conversation. It was the mention of a hidden system, DriftNet Alpha. The name wasn't public, not even on Veltrax's public patents. It was a ghost whispers on developer forums, speculated by conspiracy theorists and tech watchdogs. Why would it be embedded in a luxury car's firmware? And why was it calling out, pinging to a satellite server? Every 30 seconds, Elara's heart pounded. She had thought this was about respect, but something much bigger was humming beneath the hood. "You've been up all night, kiddo." Elara jumped. Her father, Malcolm, stood in the doorway with 2 mugs of instant coffee. His hands bore the marks of 30 years under hoods and beneath lifts, scarred, steady, and tired. But his eyes still carried a softness whenever they looked at her. "I'm fine," Elara mumbled. Malcolm walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder. "I saw the code." She froze. "You're better than I ever was. Smarter. Faster. But Elara," he paused, his voice lowering, "you poke around where you're not supposed to, the world doesn't say thanks. It comes for you." There was no anger, only fear. "I know what I'm doing," she said, a tremble hidden in defiance. He didn't argue, just looked at her as if trying to memorize every line of her face in case she disappeared into the machine like so many others before her. "Just promise me one thing," he whispered. "If it ever comes down to truth or survival." He didn't finish the sentence, and Elara couldn't promise, because deep down she already knew her answer. The live stream started like any other, a quiet, pixelated feed from the garage with the title, "EV2000 Porsche, Can We Break the Unbreakable?" In the first hour, maybe 5 people watched. By the second, it hit 500. By the third, over 50,000. Elara wasn't showing off. She was dissecting line by line the code that powered Veltrax's flagship vehicle. And then, without warning, she dropped the bomb. On camera, she opened the DriftNet shell script. She showed its activity logs, connection history, the private server addresses, and most chilling of all, the list of cars silently syncing to the system. Over 200,000. Unknowingly, constantly tracked. "Your car isn't yours," she said. "It listens more than it drives." The internet exploded. Hackers reached out. Journalists begged for interviews. Lawyers warned her to take it down. But she didn't. In that little garage in Michigan, a 13-year-old girl had just lifted the veil off a billion-dollar deception. And she wasn't done. 3 days later, a black SUV pulled up outside the garage. 2 men in suits stepped out, their badges flashing gold under the noon sun. "FBI." Malcolm stood firm at the door. "She's just a child," he said. "She's a federal witness now," one of them replied. and possibly the key to unlocking something much, much bigger. Inside, Elara watched them through a cracked window. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the weight of it all. The views, the messages, the threats. She had woken a sleeping giant. That night, as her father closed the shop early, Elara sat alone in the garage. The Porsche still sat there cold and still. But it didn't feel like a car anymore. It felt like a doorway. And she knew the next time she walked through it, there'd be no turning back. Elara's phone lit up at 2:13 a.m. Unknown number. She stared at it, debating, then picked up. A man's voice, low, sharp, calm. You don't know what you've uncovered. Shut it down. Now. Her chest tightened. Who is this? Someone who's giving you one chance. Delete your logs. Erase the stream. Forget DriftNet. Click. No threats, no curses, just the silence of someone used to being obeyed. Elara sat frozen. For the first time, she truly understood this wasn't about code anymore. It was about control, about a system that had grown teeth in the shadows. She turned to her laptop. Notifications flooded her screen. Emails, voicemails, some begging her to stop, others offering money. A lot of money. One message simply read, "Everyone has a price. What's yours, little mechanic?" She closed the laptop, not because she was afraid, because she was angry, and because she finally realized she was no longer alone. That morning, everything changed. Veltrax issued a press release. No such system exists. The footage was fabricated. The girl is part of a smear campaign by our competitors. A viral thread popped up on X, formerly Twitter, how a teen hacker fooled the world. Even some supporters turned skeptical. Deepfake a prank. Maybe she made it all up for views. Elara scrolled through the comments, her heart sinking. Truth was never enough. Not when people were addicted to doubt. But then something new. A message appeared from a private channel I worked on, DriftNet. I'll talk. Attached was a file real code, confirming her stream. Then another message. And another. Whistleblowers. Engineers. A janitor who overheard too much. A mechanic who fixed one too many strange requests. One by one they came forward, not to save her, but because she'd given them courage. DriftNet wasn't fiction, it was a mirror. And now that it had cracked, everyone who helped build it could finally see their own reflection and feel ashamed. Late that night, a black sedan pulled up quietly. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, sharp suit eyes like glass. She introduced herself as Ms. Kerrigan, Chief Security Liaison for Veltrax Global. No badge, no threats, just an envelope. Inside was a full-ride scholarship to any tech university in the world, a signed NDA, and a check. $2 million. Elara didn't speak. She just stared at the number. Kerrigan smiled, voice silky. You're gifted, Elara. We don't want to silence you. We want to cultivate you. Be our prodigy. Join us. Her father stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight. Or Kerrigan continued, keep digging, keep leaking, and you'll find out how cold the world can get. No shouting, no drama, just the kind of threat wrapped in velvet, beautiful and suffocating. Elara looked at the check again, then at her father, then back at Kerrigan. Her voice didn't tremble. If I take this, what happens to the kids who don't get offered anything? The woman blinked, then folded the check back in silence and left. The next morning, Elara opened her email. Subject line, you're making a mistake. It was from her mom. They hadn't spoken in over a year. After the divorce, her mother had vanished into a life of silence and new beginnings. But now here she was, writing for the first time. I saw the news. You're becoming everything I feared. Reckless. Angry. Your father always let you play in the dirt, but I hoped you'd outgrow it. You're not saving anyone, Elara. You're just putting yourself in danger. Just stop, she read it over and over. It wasn't the threat from Veltrax that broke her. It was this, her own mother calling her courage a tantrum, calling her justice a mistake. Tears spilled quietly down Elara's cheeks. Not from pain, but from the lonely truth that not everyone you love wants you to change the world. Sometimes they just want you to stay small enough to stay safe. But it was too late. She wasn't small anymore. Elara didn't sleep. She spent the night poring through lines of leaked code logs, satellite pings mapping the true extent of DriftNet. Not just the cars, not just the Porsche, hospital monitors, smart home devices, school networks. It wasn't just surveillance. It was pre-selection, sorting people by credit score, health history, even political alignment. She gasped. It was a machine of quiet segregation disguised as convenience. That morning she met her father at the garage. "Dad," she whispered, "they're not just watching, they're deciding. Who gets hired? Who gets loans? Who gets followed? Who disappears?" Malcolm didn't ask how she knew. He just looked at her, this tiny girl in oil-stained jeans, holding the blueprint of a global crime in her trembling hands, and nodded. Then it's time to show them everything. They didn't need a court. They didn't need a stage. All they needed was the truth and the courage to let the whole world watch it unfold. Elara pressed record. This time it wasn't just a live stream, it was a reckoning. With trembling hands and unwavering eyes, she spoke not as a teenager, but as a witness. She displayed the raw code of DriftNet, walked through its silent tendrils, infecting schools, hospitals, voting booths. She explained line by line how it didn't just monitor people, but sorted them, predicted behavior, flagged the undesirable. "Maybe you think this doesn't affect you," she said, voice tight, "but the system doesn't ask who you are. It decides what you're worth before you even live." The chat exploded. Some cheered, others panicked, some called her a liar, but millions watched. Then came the moment no one expected. Elara uploaded the access keys, a master override to DriftNet's live operations. "You want proof? Shut it down yourself." One by one, users worldwide began disabling the network from their own devices. And with every shut door, DriftNet lost another piece of its power. The system hadn't just been exposed. It had been fractured from within. Within hours, chaos erupted. Veltrax stock plummeted 38% in a single afternoon. News anchors stammered on live television, unsure whether to call Elara a hacker, a hero, or a threat. Politicians scrambled. Some condemned her as a national risk. Others demanded protection. A senator publicly called her a digital Rosa Parks, while a corporate lobbyist insisted she be tried under cyber-terrorism laws. Her father's garage became a fortress. Drones buzzed overhead. Strangers left flowers and threats at the door. And yet, something incredible began to happen. Families from every corner of the country sent messages. A mother in Detroit: "They denied my son's college loan. Now I know why." A teacher in Texas: "My students' devices kept failing standardized tests. Now it makes sense." A veteran in Ohio: "They called me unstable, but I was just unprofitable." Elara didn't reply to them all. She couldn't. But she read every single one. Because in each voice she heard the same thing. "You saw us, and now we see you." The courtroom was packed. Cameras, reporters, protesters outside with signs that read, "Let her speak and code isn't a crime." Elara stood in front of a federal judge, barely taller than the podium, but towering in presence. The prosecution tried to paint her as dangerous, a minor with major influence, a destabilizing force. She leaked proprietary data, breached national security systems. "This isn't a girl with a laptop, this is a digital wildfire," one lawyer said. Elara didn't flinch. When it was her turn, she didn't offer excuses. She told the truth about DriftNet, about the code, about her choice. "I didn't hack for money. I didn't hack for fame. I hacked because someone had to look beneath the hood and no one else would." Gasps filled the courtroom when her defense played the leaked video from Veltrax's own lab, showing executives laughing about targeting low-value demographics. It wasn't just evidence. It was the turning point. A judge doesn't rule on morality. But that day the world did. The case didn't end in jail time. It ended in something far more disruptive. Congress launched investigations. Data privacy bills were rewritten. CEOs were subpoenaed. The Veltrax CEO resigned on live television, eyes glassy, voice trembling. A global recall of all DriftNet-enabled devices was issued. But the most powerful shift happened quietly in people's minds. Suddenly, coders weren't just tech nerds. They were guardians, watchdogs, historians of digital truth. Elara was offered internships, scholarships, even book deals. But she refused them all, because this wasn't about her. She returned to the garage, now painted fresh white, with a new sign above the door: "Malcolm Systems Built by Truth." Children visited from nearby schools asking for coding lessons. Parents brought old devices begging her to look under the hood. She never charged them, because justice shouldn't be gated by privilege, and because the silence that once suffocated her was finally gone. Years later, on the 5th anniversary of the DriftNet shutdown, Elara stood before a sea of faces at a youth tech summit. She wasn't that quiet girl in the oil-stained hoodie anymore. She was composed, still young but carved by experience. People ask me if I regret it, she began. If I miss being anonymous. Safe. Small. She paused. I don't. She looked out over the crowd, some cheering, some silent, all listening. Because every system is built by people, and that means every system can be rebuilt. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. A standing ovation followed. But it wasn't the applause that moved her. It was the sight of a little girl in the front row clutching a circuit board like it was sacred. Eyes wide, hopeful, fierce, just like she once was. Elara smiled. She didn't just break the system. She had rewritten its legacy. Late one night as rain tapped softly against the windows of the garage, Elara found herself staring at an old photo. Her younger self sitting on her father's lap, hands smeared with grease, eyes full of wonder. A simpler time. A time before fame, before fear. Her phone buzzed. An email. From her mother. Not a warning. Not a dismissal. Just, I saw your speech today. You were incredible. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand. Love, Mom. Elara didn't cry, but her chest heaved with the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a door cracked open. A mother trying to meet her daughter at the place where courage had bloomed. And sometimes the hardest systems to fix are the ones we build inside our families. 2 weeks later, Elara was invited to a closed-door session with international policymakers. She sat among senators, CEOs, and cyber intelligence leaders. Most of them looked at her like she was a curiosity. One man said, "You're very talented, Miss Thompson, but you must understand systems like DriftNet aren't built by accident. They're built because they serve a purpose." Elara's voice was steady. "And what purpose is that? Profit, control, fear?" He chuckled. "Order." She leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time the world got comfortable with a little disorder, if that's what it takes to make it fair." The room went silent, not out of offense, but because they knew. She wasn't a child anymore. She was the voice of the future they could no longer ignore. Back in her hometown, the city that once mocked the mechanic's daughter began to change quietly, humbly. Public libraries began hosting coding nights for girls. A mural of a Elara hand extended over a motherboard-shaped flame appeared downtown with the words, "Truth doesn't need permission." Even the local police department reached out asking her to help audit their predictive systems, some of which had been tied to early DriftNet prototypes. She agreed, not because she trusted them, but because she believed in transparency over vengeance. If DriftNet taught her anything, it was this: power doesn't corrupt. Secrecy does. And when light is allowed into dark places, even the dustiest corners of society start to breathe again. At a national tech conference, Elara was introduced as the girl who dismantled surveillance. As she walked on stage, another speaker leaned over and whispered, "You know they'll never let someone like you run things right." Elara smiled politely, and when it was her turn to speak, she told a story. Not about code, not about courtrooms, but about the day her father handed her a wrench and said, "Fix it if you can, and if you can't figure out why." The audience laughed gently. Then she said, "I wasn't born to be let in. I was born to build something they couldn't lock me out of." She didn't blink. She didn't bow. And in that moment, she didn't just reclaim her space. She redesigned the entire blueprint of who's allowed to belong. Back at the garage, now transformed into a community tech hub, a little boy tugged at Elara's sleeve. "Miss Elara," he asked, "is it true they tried to buy you off?" She knelt beside him, smiling. "They offered. I refused." "Why?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "Because what you build with truth lasts longer than anything money can buy." That night, she stayed behind after everyone left. She walked through the garage, now filled with soldering kits, repurposed servers, and murals painted by local teens. Each cable, each circuit, not just tools, but testimonies of resilience, of resistance, of a girl who once just wanted to fix cars and ended up fixing the system that almost broke her. Elara didn't need to be remembered as a genius, only as someone who chose courage over comfort. And in that choice, she lit the way. One evening while sorting wires in the back of the garage, Elara heard the door creak open. She looked up, and there stood a woman she hadn't seen in over 6 years. Her mother. Older, tired, eyes rimmed with regret. They didn't speak at first, just stood there separated by years of silence and misunderstanding. Then her mother whispered, "You didn't just prove me wrong, Elara. You proved me small." Elara's breath hitched. 1,000 memories surged, slammed doors, cold dinners, the sting of being told to dream less. But instead of turning away, she walked forward. "You weren't small, you were scared. I was too." For the first time they hugged, not as parent and child, but as two women who had survived different storms and finally chose to meet in the calm. Weeks later, Elara was working under a rusted pickup when she found something her father had etched beneath the hood years ago. A single line scribbled with a grease pen: "She'll break things, but not herself." She stared at it for a long time, because until that moment she didn't know he'd seen her this clearly, that even in his quiet, gruff way, he'd always believed. Her father had passed away just months before DriftNet fell. He never saw the world chant her name, never saw the headlines or awards, but somehow he knew she was meant to spark a revolution. Tears slipped down her cheek, not from grief, but from recognition. His faith had been a silent engine under everything she'd built. Now it roared inside her. A group of high school girls visited the garage, whispering, giggling, until one finally asked, "Were you really the one who stopped DriftNet?" Elara smiled. "That's what the stories say. But you were just a kid. I still am some days." The girls laughed, but it was nervous laughter, the kind that dances with disbelief. So she led them to the back room, showed them her first laptop missing keys, the duct tape soldering gun, the code notebooks with spelling errors and coffee stains. "I wasn't chosen. I was curious, angry, restless." She paused. "Don't believe in superheroes. Believe in effort." They didn't just leave with photos, they left with possibility in their pockets. Elara had never set out to be a myth. She just wanted to be seen. And now she was helping others see themselves. One night, Elara opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a wrinkled envelope addressed to herself, written the night before she uploaded the DriftNet codes. She unfolded it. "Dear Elara, if you're reading this, maybe it means you didn't make it. Maybe you were caught, blamed, forgotten. But if you did, remember why you started. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the kids who don't get to speak. Don't let this world shrink you. Don't ever forget you. Were right, E.T." She smiled, folded it back. "Because some letters aren't meant to be read again. They're meant to become you." Years passed. The world didn't stay fixed. New threats rose. Greed adapted. Systems evolved. But so did Elara. She began building not just devices, but people, empowering teens across the globe with skills not just in code, but in conviction. At the opening of her nonprofit's 10th branch, a journalist asked her, "Do you ever worry your voice will get lost in all the noise?" She looked around. At the girls soldering circuits, the boys debating ethics, the teachers asking their students, "What would Elara do?" And she replied, "No, because I wasn't the voice. I was just the echo of millions waiting to be heard." She paused, then added, "And once the echo becomes a chorus, the system never stands a chance." Elara didn't destroy the world. She debugged it. And in doing so, she didn't become a legend. She became a legacy. Even the most complex systems can be undone by a single voice that refuses to stay silent. Courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about choosing truth, even when it's inconvenient, terrifying, or lonely. In a world built on control, transparency is the real revolution.